and I'm going to record too on the, just in case. You want me to record? Not required, I think. No.
Nadia, can you see on the left-hand side, meeting is now streaming live on YouTube?
Yes, we are live. Yes. Okay, which screen you guys see? You see my PowerPoint, Nadia? Okay, I think we're live. Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second town hall meeting of USA Cricket related to the Constitution, proposed Constitution amendments. We have conducted our first town hall, and we'll be covering the amendments one more time just to clarify if any members have were not able to attend on Sunday, and we can also address any questions if you may have during this presentation or even after the presentation. So I quickly want to introduce the Constitution Review Working Group members joining with me today, Nadia Rooney and Rahul Kona. They both are on live. So without taking much time, I would request Nadia to take it forward and walk you through the proposed amendments. Nadia, please take over.
Thank you, Venu. Good evening, everyone. I am Nadia Gruni, female player representative on the USA Cricket Board and chair of the Constitution Review Working Group. You will hear throughout referred to as the CRWG. So as Venu mentioned, in this evening's session, the CRG will once again provide an overview of those amendments to the articles that were approved by the board, which do not require membership's approval, first off. And then we will follow up with those proposed amendments which require ratification by the membership. But before we do that, I will share with you a high-level timeline for the Constitution review process that we have followed, as well as the USOPC, which is the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee's NGB certification timeline. At the very end, as Vanu mentioned, if there are any questions, we will address those questions that may come in during our presentation. For those who are watching live on YouTube, feel free to add your questions in the YouTube chat. Those questions will be directed to us. So starting off with our USA Cricket timeline, the review process that we have used. So this process by the CRWG in reviewing the Constitution kicked off in September 18th of 2023. Over the course of the following 3 months between September and November, the CRG met weekly for about 2 hours each time. Subsequently, there were many more meetings as well. So we've spent countless of hours reviewing and discussing the recommendations, proposing amendments, etc. We started off first by reviewing the recommendations made by the CRWG back in 2021. There was a different group, along with the former CEO, Mr. Ian Higgins. We reviewed those recommendations, provided our impressions, and made our own recommendations to the board for its consideration. On November 11th, 2023, I presented the proposed amendments to the membership of USA Cricket at the USA Cricket's AGM. And then following that, we invited the membership to provide feedback via an online submission form for just about a week between November 15th and November 22nd. We got a lot of feedback. We took those into consideration, discussed them, and also made additional changes as necessary and proposed those to the board. Throughout the process, we have engaged the global law firm Bryan Cave Leighton Paisner, just to ensure that our proposed amendments are in accordance with Colorado's nonprofit laws, with the Ted Stevens Olympic and Amateur Sports Act, as well as the USOPC's bylaws, which of course they're governed by the Ted Stevens Act. We also took legal counsel's best practices, given their familiarity with what other US sports NGBs are doing in the country. So we took those into consideration as well when we made our recommendations. So as many of you know, we are now in the middle of the process of voting, which started on Monday, January 29th, and is set to end on Monday, February 5th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific. Next, we'll just go through the USOPC's timeline. So last week, as some of you may have seen in the press release today, that we have met with several officials and executives of the USOPC to kick off the process to become the certified NGB for cricket. Now that cricket is accepted into the Olympics, we are required to seek NGB status with the USOPC. And being certified as the NGB for cricket in the US it's going to require a heavy lift. It requires several governance and operational changes that will definitely raise the bar and raise the standards of this organization, as well as the standards of our athletes as well. USA Cricket will be spending the rest of this year getting into compliance, making those operational changes, making those governance changes so that we can submit the official application for NGB status by the end of this year. For the rest of next year, the entire year, it's going to be spent with the USOPC conducting audits to ensure that we are implementing those changes that we've said we're going to make this year, both governance and operational. They're going to identify areas that we need to remediate, and then we're going to work on fixing any of those areas so that by the end of next year, our application is going to be put in front of the USOPC's board to make a final decision on our application for NGB status. Once approved, that status, official status, will be granted to us in Q1 of 2026. So a lot of work ahead for us. We are not the only NGB going through this process. USA Lacrosse is doing it. USA Flag Football is doing it. And I believe USA Skimo, as it's called, Ski Mountaineering Association is doing that as well. So with that, I would now like to hand it over to Rahul Kona to take us through those amendments that were approved by the board and does not require membership's ratification. So Rahul, on to you.
Thank you, Nadia, and thank you everyone for joining today. Just want to echo Nadia, Venu, and other team members, sentiments. From September 23 to today, in the less than 3 months or 4 months timeline, it has been an Herculean task of getting through all the legal approvals and, going through all the compliance work and everything else. So it's been a great journey, and, thank you for everyone for being a part of this as well. I'm going to talk to you about 4 articles that, are there, which is the Article 4, 11, 12, and 17. I'm not going to go through the details, individual details, or read the slides, but, when you look at it, we need to be part of the, recognized as an NGB. And as Nadia alluded, we've already started that process, to becoming a certified NGB. So we meet the requirements of transparency, good governance, conflict of interest, ethical code of conduct, so on and so forth. This will actually help us get to that level and get to, better, governance and global audience and sponsorships as well. So that's something that's we're very keen to work on. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think Article 11 talks about the Athletes Advisory Council. The USOPC Advisory Council offers numerous benefits, for athletes. That includes, representation, which is like providing platform for athletes to voice their opinions, concerns and suggestions, gives them support, resources, guidance, education, community welfare, networking. I think this Athletes Council will play a crucial role in empowering athletes and ensuring that their needs and perspectives are considered at all levels across for sports governance. Now, some of these, requirements, we are very infant organization. Some of these requirements we have to go seek some exemptions probably, and we'll work with that specifically when it relates to 10-year or 10-year plus athletes. We may or may not have, that requirement, but we'll work through the agencies to bypass this and get our approvals. Next slide, please. Article 12 talks about the Athletes Commission. Again, the Athlete Commission serves as a vital link between athletes and the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, which plays a crucial role that ensures that athletes' perspectives are considered in decision-making process of USOPC and in promoting the welfare and interests of the athletes within the Olympic and Paralympic movements. These are all great things for us to have, and something that will help us hold us in good stead as we move forward through these processes. Articles, next slide, please. The Article 17, it's a no-brainer. It's the records of a USA Cricket, as every organization, public or a private company, needs to hold their books and records. We also have to hold our books and records and look at key minutes of the meeting, and board minutes must be posted online, kept in for 3 years, and make sure that we publish a full list of members so the elections are done on time and done right. So all those things, we're bringing a lot of transparency and accountability through these processes. So this is something which is what we need, and we look forward to working with all of you in the coming months and years. That ends the conclusion of my part. I'll hand it over back to Nadia.
Thank you, Rahul. I will hand it off to Venu to take Article 6.
Sure. Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Rahul. So the Article 6 mainly talks about the membership, changes to the membership and the amendments proposed. So there are some changes related to the membership definitions and adding the USOPC requirements around the player members. The athletes, as per the USOPC requirement, there needs to be athlete members who are 10-year athletes, which means the athletes that played for the USA national teams in the last 10 years. And there can be 10+ year athletes who have represented USA more than 10 years ago. And there will be actively engaged athletes who may not have represented USA national team, but actively engaged in the domestic events. And the membership requirements as per the USOPC open to individuals and amateur sports organizations in cricket as part of the USA Cricket membership program. And that includes all the individuals and the organizations in cricket in the USA can become a member of USA membership program. So the key proposed amendments, change to some definitions around the membership classes, and adding the USOPC athlete-related memberships, and changed at the club membership level. Previously, club needs to have 12 members. There is no change on that front, but there should be a league to qualify as a voting member. There's supposed to be 3 clubs. It requires to be 3 clubs. Now we are increasing to 8 clubs. And renaming the other organization from the current definition to associate organization. And for-profit organizations also can become a USOC member under this category. And we have strengthened the eligibility criteria to determine legitimate leagues. And in order to a league to be qualified, apart from meeting their eligibility criteria with 8 clubs and each club having 12 members, and there are other requirements that league has to prove that it's a legitimate league operating with bylaws and operating laws, and also have proper registration, federal registrations, so on. And we removed the discretion to USA Cricket to accept, reject, or withdraw any membership from the current criteria. And we have added languages that requires individual members to comply with all anti-doping rules of ICC, USOPC, and WADA and USADA. These are some of the changes under the membership. Go to the next slide. And as far as the zones are concerned, currently USA Cricket has 6 zones with 3 conferences. And in order to match with any other sport operating in the country, we have reduced the conferences to 2 to, for the administration purposes and, for the ease of organizing, games or activities across the 2 conferences. And the zones have been increased from current 6 to 8. 1 zone added in the East Conference and 1 zone added in the West Conference. So the new names of the conferences would be, for the West Conference, there is a Central, Central West, Northwest, Southwest. And for East Conference, there is Atlantic, East, Northeast, and South. And we also added a force majeure clause into this. And this is a current map of 6 zones. If you can see, the West zone is huge, with spanning from all the way from north to south, with many states. And the other 5 zones are Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, South, Midwest, Southwest in the current structure. And this is the new proposed zone structure, where we added Northwest, and we have split Mid-Atlantic into a second zone, added a second zone, Mid-Atlantic South. South Atlantic, all right. So this rezoning is basically to support the USA Cricket initiatives in terms of managing those initiatives and assigning the staff or resources and managing the programs without having people to have to fly, long distances. We want to take this opportunity to clarify that these zones not necessarily solely for the national tournaments, but that is one of the criteria. But we are going to follow a criteria where national tournament format, team format will be depending on, will be defined based on the volume and registrations each year. It not necessarily based on solely on the zonal structure. So what that means, a zone at a minimum may have one team representing at the national level in the national tournament, but not necessarily only one team. So it can have multiple teams. So basically, we want to give that flexibility to the committees and the management to decide each year in order to provide equal opportunity and the maximum potential opportunities to the talented players across the country. So I know in 2023, we have followed a process where we could accommodate only zonal based teams, but based on the learning, based on the quality of the teams and based on the opportunities available for the players across the country. And we are going to give that flexibility to the committees, the cricket committee and the development committee, to form the national teams, teams form, competing in the national tournament based on the registration and based on the volume. So currently, last year we have 18 junior hubs, and there are several regionals for the women's side. But this year we want to focus our activities around the hubs, and then if as needed, we may form the teams based on the regions within the zones. So hope this will clarify if any of the members have any concerns around whether one zone getting advantage over other zone or not in terms of national tournaments. Article 7 talks about board of directors. The changes as far as the USOPC requirements, there has to be 33.3% of athlete representation on the board of directors. And we have tightened the independent director eligibility criteria just to address some of the gaps. And board governance, tightened conflict of interest requirements, and also election process and consistency around the elections and managing the elections appropriately. So these are the USOPC requirements, and the proposed amendments in order to meet USOPC and also make it following the best practices and the learnings from the past few years. So number one, we are going to increase the board of directors number from 10 to 12 to accommodate 33.3 athlete representation without having to change any of the other directors categories. So in future, there will be 4 athlete representatives, 2 male, 2 female, and 3 independent directors, 1 league director, 1 club director, and 3 individual directors. Total 12. And we added some language around restricting geographic representation among independent, individual, and player directors. So previously, it used to be at the conference level, it will still be at the conference level, but since there are only 2 conferences going to be, and we have added the language to restrict a specific category number of directors from a conference to a limit number. So not necessarily one conference having all of the directors in those 3 categories. And the another important change is Team Athletes Commission representation. Basically, there will be USA Cricket will be forming a USA Athletes Commission, where all the athletes that represented USA will become members of that Athletes Commission, and that Athlete Commission will play a major role in electing the athletes onto the board, and also making any appointments to various USA Cricket committees in the future. And also the Athlete Commission will elect a representative who will represent Team USA Athletic Association under the USOPC. And we simplified the renomination process for independent director if he's running for a 2nd term. And then we reassigned responsibility from NGC to ethics and grievance and disciplinary committee to evaluate board directors, the candidates contesting for the board directors positions, conflict and ethics concerns. So currently NGC has a bigger task of reviewing and assessing and evaluating the eligibility of candidates. But out of that, the eligibility evaluation around the conflicts and the ethics will be assigned to Ethics and Grievance Committee by NGC as required. And a few more requirements under the board of directors. As for the USOPC, independent and affiliate representation. So added an affiliate organization board position if such organization exists. Board governance, administer elections fairly, consistently, and appropriately. and have explicit board member terms and term limits, and have a process for removal of board members, and board development, under the board development, USOPC training for board members. So these are the USOPC requirements to match those and to address other areas of gaps. So going forward, the directors contesting under the individual club and league director category must submit two letters of recommendations from the USA Cricket members. And then, so there will be increase in number of candidates running for individual league and club director positions. Currently, there is a limit, and but that is a increase to higher number. And currently we have a lot of confusion, and leading to delays and confusion among the members in terms of cutoff times and the renewal cutoffs in order to eligible for the voting. So we are standardizing that voter eligibility and also candidate eligibility going forward to be with a cutoff date of June 30. So what that means, anybody can become a member anytime in a year, but in order to vote in an election and also contest in an election, there is a certain requirement as per the Constitution. So to vote in an election, you have to be a member for 12 months. But even if you are meeting that, in the year of election, you have to renew your membership. That renewal cutoff is June 30 going forward. So, and also for the candidate, if you want to contest in the election, you have to be a member in the 2 out of the preceding 3 years, and also you should have renewed your membership on time before the cutoff by June 30th. And as per the USOPC requirement, we are also adding a affiliate organization director position whenever there is a criteria mentioned in the proposed amendments. And if any organization meets that criteria, they will become part of they will have one position on the board of directors. And the Constitution will be mandating all the directors to receive US Center for Safe Sport training at onboarding. And a few more changes. Under the governance, administer elections fairly, consistently, and appropriately, and have explicit board terms and term limits, and have a process for removal of board members. So this has been an issue for the last few years, and in terms of elections, there were delays for various reasons, membership related issues and other issues. And the terms were extended for board members, even though their board members continued on the board, even though their terms expired. Of course, that is according to the Colorado law, where it says board members can continue until the elections are held. But in circumstances beyond our control, the terms have expired, but board members continued beyond their more than reasonable amount of time on the board previously. Currently, we have caught up with all the elections, and immediately we have a need to start an independent director re-election or election process, which will kickstart immediately after the completion of voting on the Constitution amendments. But however, going forward, Constitution requires the officers to be accountable to conduct the elections on time. So if the elections are not conducted on time, and the officers must resign from their positions. So just to add clarity, officers are the chairman, treasurer, and according to the current new proposed amendments, it's a secretary. So these are the 3 officers of the board, and they will hold the accountability to conduct the elections on time. Added the tenure of existing members to address staggering lost with previous board of directors elections delayed prior to 2023. So there is a table published in the proposed amendments. Basically, we are trying to align all the terms to end at December 31st every year. We have planned this before, but because of the delays in the last 3 elections, we could not manage that. So currently, board members' terms are expiring at different times in each year, for some terms expiring in July, some terms expiring in April. So to bring them back to the desired expiration term, we have adjusted the terms for the current directors, whereas the directors who got elected, first half of the year, their terms are shortened by 3-4 months to expire early by December 31st. And some directors who started in August, second part of the year, their terms are extended to end of the, extended maybe 5 months to end at the December 31st. But with this, we are able to stagger, we are able to adjust the terms to end at the end of 2025 for most of these elected directors, and other directors will also be ending at the December starting now. And starting this year, the player director terms will be aligned with the mandated USOPC requirement to end with a period of 4 years. So when the player director terms expire this year, end of this year, there will be 4 player directors, 2 female, 2 male will be added. Those terms will be staggered accordingly to expire, So 2 directors will hold 2-year term and 2 directors will hold 4-year term. So the terms will be staggered. And Constitution also mandating to ensure board members cannot serve beyond their maximum term limit, either 6 for elected and independent directors, and 8 in case of player directors. And it also mandates directors who served maximum consecutive years to take at least a 2-year cooling off period before they become eligible or they decide to run again for the elections. And there are expanded conditions for the removal of director in case of breach of code of ethics, and specified that directors shall not receive compensation for their services. So it's not that it happened, but we want to be explicitly mention that the directors cannot receive any compensation. Their expenses can be reimbursed, but they will not receive any compensation, part of this new proposed amendments. Okay, I think that concludes my section. Nadia, you want to take over?
Thank you, Vanu. All right, moving on to Article 8, officers. Our key proposed amendment is to add the executive secretary officer role. Currently, we have 2 officers, and that is the chairperson of the board, as well as the treasurer. And so the scope of the executive secretary is going to be to record the minutes, to provide notices and communications to members, and manage logistics of meetings, of our board meetings specifically, and generally to be the custodian of corporate records. With regards to our USOPC requirements, it aligns with the 3 requirements of having good board governance. So this role is going to assist us in ensuring that we meet those minimum standards, especially around documentation and having good governing practices. The role and the person is also going to help us ensure that we have our board meeting minutes captured and posted to the website as required. And that's something that we are doing already. So that is great. And then finally, the next requirement of submitting NGB annual reports to the USOPC. This, again, is one of the most important requirements of the USOPC, that at the end of the year, reports need to be submitted with information which describes how the organization is maintaining compliance, provide all types of reporting on how are we ensuring that we're promoting diversity and equity and inclusion, meeting our financial compliances, etc. So it's a pretty significant ask and a pretty significant role for the executive secretary. And moving on to the next Article 9, committees. Our key proposed amendments for committees would be, so we have proposed to reduce the terms from 3 years to 2 years, except in the case of the Leagues Committee, which is going to be 1 year, and that is purely because the composition of the Leagues Committee is based on the size of the leagues across the country. So the largest leagues get to nominate a representative on the Leagues Committee. And so given that the size of leagues can change from year to year, we have updated the term of the Leagues Committee members to be 1 year. We have also proposed to restructure the Cricket Committee to focus on men's under 19s all the way up to men's senior teams and players. So that can include under 23s, any emerging teams that we may form, or USA A teams as well, A, even B possibly. And then the rest of the responsibilities that have been under the Cricket Committee have been distributed to 2 other committees, the Development Committee and Women's Cricket Committee, which we have proposed to make as standing committees in the Constitution. This also aligns with our strategic focus areas of the organization for the next 4 to 5 years. The Development Committee is going to oversee all age group cricket for boys, everything from participation and development into domestic pathway competitions and getting those athletes ready for high performance programs and higher age groups and the senior teams. In the Women's Cricket Committee, this committee is going to oversee all things women's cricket. So again, similarly to the Development Committee, but focus on females all the way from the grassroots through domestic competition, all the way up to high performance programs and national teams. In addition to what happens on the field, the Women's Cricket Committee is also going to oversee the development, engagement activities and initiatives to get more females involved in the sports in various capacities, whether it's as officials, coaches, administrators, etc. As Venu mentioned previously, and similarly to the board, each committee is going to have 33 1/3% athlete representation. Currently, we've got 20% athlete representation, so a somewhat light lift for us to, in some cases, add an additional athlete representative on the committees. And all of these athlete representatives on the committees would no longer be appointed by the player directors on the board. They will be appointed by the USA Cricket's Athletes Advisory Council. We have also added that the board can remove any committee member except athlete representatives, who can only be removed by the USA Cricket AAC. And again, this is as per the USOPC's requirements and bylaws. We've also removed USOPC's appointee to the Nominating and Governance Committee. And this is at the USOPC's request. So currently, the NGC comprises 4 members. 1 member is appointed by the board. 1 member is appointed by ICC. Per the current constitution, 1 member should be appointed by the USOPC, and then 1 member appointed by the player directors, which would be an athlete representative. Given USOPC's decision not to provide an appointee to the NGC now and in the future, we have just decided to remove that position entirely. We've also tightened the conflict of interest criteria, similar to what we've done for board of directors. And this is because serving on the NGC is a very critical role for the organization. And we want to ensure that NGC members are independent throughout the process and throughout their terms. And then finally, we have reduced the Ethics, Grievance, and Disciplinary Committee from 8 members to 5 members. And what you'll see throughout as well is that we have worked to standardize the composition of committees where we can to 5 members. So in most cases, there would be 2 athlete representatives and each 5-member committee. How do these align with the USOPC's requirements? I've referenced some of those throughout. We are meeting the requirement of having 33 1/3% athlete representation on committees. And that's all committees, whether there are standing committees or other committees. And then we've also got the Athletes Advisory Council, who is going to be responsible for appointing the athlete representatives to committees. The AAC is going to comprise 6 members. All 6 will be 100% athlete representatives. We are going to strive for gender balance as well in the AAC. So that is going to be one of the biggest changes for us moving forward. And then finally, good board governance. One of the requirements is to have clear election, selection, and removal procedures for committee members. And we have improved those, the clause relating to how committee members may be removed. We actually have a couple more key proposed amendments for committees. We have proposed to reduce league committee composition from 15 to 12 members. And those 12 members would be based on having 1 league representative from each of the 8 zones and 4 athlete representatives, which will make up our 33 1/3% athlete representation on the committee. And last but not least, we have also proposed to reduce the composition of the audit committee from 8 to 5 members and added qualifications to members of the audit committee. For example, at least 2 members of the audit committee must have a finance and or audit and risk background. Finally, Article 20, which describes ways the Constitution can be amended. There are no material changes to this article. We have only updated the article numbers referenced within the clauses, given that we have added 2 new articles in the Constitution, which are Article 11 and 12. And I believe those are the Athletes Advisory Council, as well as the Team USA Athletes Commission. Given that 2 of those articles were added, it means that every other article thereafter gets bumped down too. So it's just a change in the reference number. And with that, that concludes the review of our proposed amendments. We're looking at the next steps in front of us. Again, as Venu mentioned at the top of this meeting, this is the 2nd town hall USA Cricket is hosting to review the proposed the proposed Constitution amendments. The Constitution is currently in front of the membership for ratification. To those who have voted already, thank you for your participation. And for those who have not yet voted, we do call out to you and request that you do participate. This is, of course, a very democratic process, and we would like your feedback and your decision on the ratification of this Constitution. I do want to reiterate that our proposed amendments, as you can see, are quite intertwined with USOPC's governance requirements. In the USA, we have the front row seats to what is likely to be the biggest Summer Olympics in history, just by virtue of cricket's inclusion and, of course, hosting a Summer Olympics in the US for the first time since 1996. As USA Cricket, the governing body for the sport in the US, we have the biggest opportunity before us, but we have to earn our place among the USOPC family and to represent Team USA. And as many of you know, Team USA is a very strong brand and known throughout the world as the best in sports. And so, you know, USOPC in our meeting last week have measured their success and their wins by the number of gold medals that they've won in the Olympics, not simply the total aggregate of gold, silver, and bronze medals. They are very much looking forward to us going for the best, going for the gold, and really being a part of the Team USA family. And to be the best, we need the absolute best from everyone. As we know, change is always hard at first. As they say, messy in the middle and beautiful at the end. So we thank you for being a part of this process and look forward to you continuing and as I've said, those who have not yet voted, please do go out and vote. Voting closes on Monday, February 5th at 11:59 p.m. Thank you all for tuning in and for your cooperation in this exciting journey ahead.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you everyone for joining the town hall. The recording will be available on our YouTube channel. And like Nadia mentioned, the election, the voting continues till and ends on midnight first week on February 5th. So we request all of you to support, use your eligibility as a USA Cricket voting member and voice your opinion. And we have done, I think, we believe we have done tremendous work in terms of bringing the governance to a reasonable structure and also adopting all the USOPC requirements. And with all these, I think we'll strengthen the organization and we'll become a strong NGB to operate cricket in this country. And we have done our part and we request you to do your part. Thank you very much. And if you still have any questions, you can email us or you can reach out to any of the board of directors who can address and clarify any of your questions. The email address to send your questions is membership@usacricket.org. Thank you very much. Have a good night.